The moment I pushed open those ballroom doors, my heart didn't drop. It stopped. Not from surprise, not from confusion, from the kind of dread that grabs your spine before your mind even catches up. The room wasn't empty. It felt abandoned, like somebody walked away from a plan meant to bury me alive. I'm Felicia, and the part of this story that will make you hold your breath is not what I saw. It's what my own daughter said after she made sure I would see it. Alone. My heels barely touched the marble before that silence slammed into me. Heavy, frozen, unnatural. The entire ballroom looked untouched, like a place waiting for an event that never came. No lights on, no decor, no chairs, just rows of tables pushed against the walls like they didn't want to be part of what happened next. I stepped inside slowly. Instinct tightening in my chest, the way it does when life is about to shift for good. My royal blue gown swept across the floor behind me, soft and elegant. Too beautiful for the graveyard of a wedding that should have been filled with music and laughter. The air felt thick, cold, watching. It felt like somebody had been here already and made sure I walked in last. I gripped my clutch tighter and scanned the corners, searching for anything. Footprints, petals, a stray napkin, a whisper of celebration. There was nothing. Nothing but a truth trying to rise out of the floorboards. My phone buzzed inside my hand. One buzz, two, three, then it stopped and started again and again. My throat tightened. I answered before I could think. Sienna, baby. Her whisper cut into me like ice breaking under a footstep. How did you even find that place? The coldness in her voice made my stomach twist. You sent the address. I said softly, I'm here. I don't see. A pause. Sharp, chilling. The kind of pause people take when they're about to reveal exactly how little they think of you. That's because it's the wrong address. Her tone was flat, controlled, deadly anything. My legs stiffened. She continued, I gave it to you on purpose. Something inside me cracked so sharply, I felt it in the base of my spine. You weren't supposed to show up looking like that, she whispered. You weren't supposed to show up at all. If you've ever had someone you love slice you open with their voice alone, just drop a heart, so I know your story has walked beside mine. I held the phone tighter. Baby, why? Her answer didn't tremble. Not a single break in her voice. There are no seats for fat pigs like you. The call ended just like that. And the silence that replaced her voice felt like it wrapped around my neck. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't move. The insult dropped inside my chest with the force of a body hitting cold water. A staff worker entered through the side door carrying a box of glassware. She froze when she saw me. An overdressed woman standing alone in a dead ballroom. Ma'am, she whispered, sympathy flooding her eyes. Can I help you find a room? I shook my head, forcing my lips into something that wasn't a smile, but pretended to be, no, sweetheart. I'm leaving. The walkout felt longer than the years I spent raising that child. My heels echoed behind me like they were carrying the truth I didn't want to admit. The automatic doors slid open and warm air blasted against my face. The kind of air that shouldn't come to a woman who just watched her motherhood collapse. I made it to my car, opened the door, and sank into the seat. The dress puddled around me like a reminder of everything I wasn't allowed to be today. I lifted the visor mirror. The woman staring back at me looked like she'd aged in seconds. Eyes dull, mouth trembling, soul bruised. My voice barely Made it past my lips. Why would my own child do this? The quiet in my house hit harder than her words. It met me right at the door, thick and unmoving, like it had been waiting all day to swallow me. I closed it gently behind me, the soft click sounding too final, too much like an ending I never agreed to. The smell of vanilla candles lingered in the air. I'd lit them earlier, trying to make the morning feel special. Now it just stung. I walked straight to my bedroom without turning on a single light. The afternoon sun leaked through the curtains enough to see the shimmer of my dress as I stepped out of my shoes. My feet ached, but not from walking. Hurt can settle in your body so deeply it finds a place in your bones. I unclasped my earrings slowly, laying them on the dresser one at a time, small rituals that stop you from falling apart too fast. My necklace followed, the royal blue stones catching the light for a moment before going still. I folded my dress carefully, smoothing every crease with the palm of my hand. It didn't matter that no one saw me in it. It mattered that I tried. When I finally sat on the edge of my bed, the silence grew heavier, not comforting, not peaceful, just aware. Aware of the humiliation I hadn't processed yet. Aware of the daughter whose voice still echoed in my ear like something sharp that refused to fade. Aware of the way my chest tightened every time I inhaled. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Miss Janice. Across the hall. Everything all right? You looked so beautiful leaving earlier. I stared at the message longer than I should have. My fingers moved before my phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Miss Janice. Across the hall. Everything all right? You looked so beautiful leaving earlier. I stared at the message longer than I should have. My fingers moved before my heart caught up. Wedding got moved. A lie, but a soft one. The kind older women give each other when truth feels too heavy to carry across the hallway. She replied almost instantly. Try to get some rest. Baby, I locked my phone. Without answering. Rest wasn't coming. Not tonight. I pushed myself up, needing water. Something, anything that made me stand in the kitchen. The fridge hum was louder than it needed to be. I reached for a glass, but my eyes caught something on the table. Something I didn't remember leaving there. A sealed envelope, white, thick, clean with neat black lettering across the front. Blue Ridge Events and Catering. My stomach tightened. The morning flashed back. Sienna rushing me at her apartment weeks ago, thrusting papers in my hands. Mom, please just sign it. I'm already late. Me trusting her because I wanted to believe we were mending things, even if the thread was thin. I picked up the envelope, the weight of it heavier than paper should ever feel. I didn't open it. My thumb pressed against the seal. But something inside me stopped. The same part of me that knew when she had a fever as a child. The same part that noticed when her tone changed. The same part that had felt today's shift before I even stepped into that empty ballroom. I set the envelope back down gently. I wasn't ready to know what was inside. Not tonight. I turned off the kitchen light and walked back toward my room. The envelope still sitting on the table like a heartbeat I didn't want to hear. The house was too still, too quiet, too aware of the crack that had just formed between me and my only child. I eased myself onto the bed again, letting the darkness settle around me. I didn't cry. Not because it didn't hurt, but because some pains don't come out as tears. Some sit in your chest like a stone, waiting for the moment you're alone enough to feel every ounce of it. Tonight wasn't about understanding what happened. It was about surviving the soundlessness that followed. In the dim light, my eyes fell once more on that envelope across the room, untouched and waiting. Something inside told me opening it would change everything. And for the first time in years, I wasn't sure if I wanted to know the truth. The envelope didn't move all night, but it felt like it watched me. By morning, it was the first thing my eyes landed on when I opened the bedroom door. The same clean white, the same black letters, the same quiet thread I'd walked away from. Nothing in my life had changed since yesterday. But somehow everything had. I walked toward the table slowly, barefoot, the floor cool under my feet. Sunlight slipped through the blinds and drew lines across the envelope like somebody had put it under a spotlight. I stood there for a long second just staring at my own name on the label to Felicia Ross. It's a strange thing, seeing your name tied to something you don't remember asking for. I pulled the chair out and sat down. My fingers hovered over the edge. That old familiar tremble starting up again. This time I didn't pull back. I slid a nail under the seal and tore it open before I could talk myself out of it. Paper slid out. Multiple pages stapled crisp. Company logo at the top. Lines and numbers underneath. I held them with both hands. Eyes scanning slowly. Client Sienna Ross. Secondary party / Gerer. Felicia Ross. My chest tightened. My gaze moved down to the middle of the page. The words blurred for a second, then came into sharp focus. Backup. Payment authorization security hold. $5,000. I blinked hard. Read it again. $5,000. A cold rush went through me. The kind that doesn't ask if you're ready. It just arrives and sits heavy. 5,000 wasn't just a number on paper for me. That was rent months, groceries, medication, tires I'd been putting off. The kind of money I didn't have lying around to play backup for anybody's wedding. The memory came back in pieces like somebody turning a dial on an old radio. Sienna's living room. Fabric swatches on the coffee table. Laptop open with wedding photos. Her pacing talking fast. Mom, they just need a name. And a backup in case the guest count shifts. That's all she'd said, sliding the clipboard toward me. I remember picking it up slowly, eyes trying to find the line that made sense. Head count, catering, final numbers. It was all mixed in with terms I didn't really understand. Feels like a lot of paper for head count. I'd murmured half to myself. She'd sighed. That sharp kind of sound that made me feel like I was already in the way. Mom, please. I need this. Don't make everything harder. They're waiting on me. I'd looked at her face instead of the form. At the tension in her jaw, at the glossy, tired eyes. At the girl I'd held through childhood fevers and heartbreak. Now standing there like the world would end if this one thing didn't go her way. I'd signed fast, wanting to help, wanting stupidly to be part of her big day any way I could. Now, the ink stared back at me from the page, my own handwriting, my full name sitting right under the words guarantor, responsible party if primary fails to pay. My hand tightened around the paper until it crinkled. An ache worked its way up my arm and settled in my shoulders. This wasn't just about the insult anymore. Just about the wrong address or the empty venue. My child hadn't only cut me out of her wedding. She put me underneath it. Quietly, I checked the dates on the contract. The timeline matched perfectly. 2 weeks before the wedding. The same day she'd made me tea and called me Mamour. times than usual. The same day I'd walked home feeling like maybe we were finally finding our way back to each other. I flipped to the second page. More numbers, overtime charges, cleaning fees, security deposit hold, everything tied to that same $5,000 safety net with my name wrapped around it like a rope. A slow heat rose up my neck, not loud anger, but something deeper, a knowing. A realization that this wasn't a mistake or a misunderstanding. She knew exactly what she'd asked me to sign. I was the only one who hadn't understood it. I set the papers down carefully, smoothing them with my palm. The way I'd smoothed my dress the night before. My heart thudded it against my ribs, steady but heavy, like it was carrying more than blood. Now, before I could decide what to do next, my phone lit up on the table beside the contract. Unknown number. It started ringing. The unknown number rang again before I could steady my breath. Something in my chest tightened. A slow coil winding itself. Without permission. I pressed accept, holding the phone to my ear with fingers that still smelled faintly of lotion and regret. Hello. A woman's voice came through. Professional, calm, the kind of tone people use when they're about to tell you something you won't like. Good morning. I'm looking for Felicia Ross. My name sounded strange in her mouth. Too official, too precise. This is she. She exhaled softly like she wasn't sure how I'd take what came next. Ma'am, this is Carrera from Blue Ridge Events and Catering. We've been trying to reach you. You're listed as the guarantor for the Kendrick Ross wedding. The words hit me one by one. Slow but heavy. Guarantor. Wedding. My name. I swallowed. There must be a mistake. I didn't authorize anything. There was a pause. Not rude, not suspicious, just knowing like she'd heard that same sentence from too many mothers before. Me. Ma'am, she said gently, I understand, but I'm looking at the contract right now. We're trying to settle an outstanding balance of $1,780. It's from overtime and damages after the reception. My fingers tightened around the phone. I closed my eyes for a second, seeing nothing but the faded sun filtering through my blinds and the folded papers on my table. My handwriting staring back at me like proof of my own naivety. I didn't agree to be a guarantor. I whispered. My voice cracked on the last word. I didn't know what I was signing. Kara's tone softened further. The sympathy real enough to sit in. Miss Ross, your signature is right here. Full name, date, and contact. It looks like the forms were completed 2 weeks before the event. 2 weeks. The same week Sienna called me Mom, 3 extra times. The same week she made me tea and asked about my childhood recipes. The same week she hugged me before I left. A hug that now felt like a setup dressed in affection. I looked back at the contract on the table. The ink from my signature pressed deep into the paper like I had leaned too hard, trying too much. My stomach turned. I remembered that day clearly now. The rush in her voice, the pressure behind her eyes, the way she slid the clipboard across the counter. Like a test she already knew I'd fail. Is there any way to remove my name? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Not without the primary signer. Present, she said. And they haven't returned our calls. That's why we reached out to you. Of course, they hadn't. Sienna was probably still twirling on a honeymoon dance floor somewhere, pretending her mother didn't exist. Pretending the woman she called a fat pig didn't have a financial rope tied to her neck. I pressed a palm to my chest, trying to quiet the pounding. I don't have $1,780. I understand, she repeated. And I believed her. We're not asking for payment today, but we do need confirmation from one of the listed contacts to proceed. My breath caught. One of the listed contacts. Yes, ma'am. If we can't reach you, she continued, we'll contact the secondary listed party, the Kendrick family. My hand froze mad. Her words sliced the room open. The Kendrick family, Sienna's wealthy in-laws, the same people Sienna didn't want me anywhere near. The same people she built a whole lie to impress. For a moment, the world went still. Even the fridge hum disappeared. Only the sound of my own heartbeat remained. Slow, deliberate, warning me that whatever came next wouldn't be quiet. Carrera cleared her throat softly. If we don't hear from you by the end of today, we'll reach out to them. The line stayed open, but I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything except stare at the papers that held my handwriting like evidence. Because if the Kendricks got that call, Sienna's entire lie would crack open. The call didn't wait for noon. It happened early. Too early for polite conversation. Too early for suspicion to sound like anything but truth. I wasn't there when the phone rang in the Kendricks' home, but I could picture it later. The way wealthy houses hold silence like furniture. The vendor dialed the secondary number on the contract exactly the way she said she would. She reached the groom's mother, Lorraine Kendrick, a woman whose voice could cut glass without raising a single decibel. Good morning, Carrera said. Calm and steady. I'm calling to confirm details for the Kendrick-Ross wedding. We're trying to reach Felicia Ross listed as guarantor. There was a pause. Long, sharp. Offended. Who? Lorraine asked, each letter pronounced like she was saying a foreign word. Felicia Ross, Cara repeated, mother of the bride. A breath caught on the other end, not a soft one. The kind that fills a room. I'm sorry. Why are you asking for a Felicia Ross? We don't know her. Sienna's mother passed away years ago. Cara blinked into the phone, caught between professionalism and disbelief. Ma'am, she signed all the last-minute paperwork. Her signature is on every authorization form. The silence that followed wasn't confusion. It was the sound of something cracking clean down the middle. Lorraine's voice returned tighter, controlled. That's impossible. My daughter-in-law's mother is deceased. She told us herself. Carrera's tone stayed. Even I understand, but Ms. Ross's number and signature are present on the documents. We've already spoken to her. The words spoken to her landed like a slap across a marble countertop. Lorraine pulled the phone away from her ear, staring at the wall as if it had betrayed her, too. The lie didn't just unravel. It exposed itself sharp and loud. And then something clicked. Something that hadn't mattered earlier. Something she'd brushed off the way rich families brush off things that don't fit their expectations. Brunch. A guest leaning over the table. Laughter in her voice. I swear I saw a woman this morning who looked just like Sienna. Maybe her mom. They all laughed back then, politely, because Sienna's story had already framed Felicia as a memory, not a living woman who could walk into a hotel lobby wearing royal blue satin. But now that offhand comment came back with teeth. The resemblance, the dress, the timing, the envelope name, the call. Pieces rearranged themselves into a truth that had been sitting in plain sight. Sienna lied. Not small, not subtle, a full, deliberate lie baked deep into the heart of their family. Lorraine pressed the phone back to her ear. Her voice was controlled, but a cold edge had entered it. What exactly did she sign? Kara went through the details. The $5,000 hold. The overtime charges, the damages, Felicia's number as the primary contact. Lorraine listened without interrupting. The anger didn't show. Kendrick women didn't shout. They froze. They sharpened. When the call ended, Lorraine didn't move for several seconds. She stared out the kitchen window at the manicured yard her family had built for 3 generations. Wealth that wasn't meant to be touched by scandal, lies, or daughters-in-law who rewrote their pasts. She picked up her cell phone, thumb hovering over Sienna's name. She didn't blink. She didn't breathe any softer. She pressed call. The moment Sienna answered, Lorraine didn't say hello. Didn't adjust her tone. Didn't cushion the fall. We need to talk, she said, her voice steady as stone. Now nothing else, no hint of what she knew. No explanation, just the command, the kind that tells you trouble is already in the room with you. And somewhere across town, Sienna felt it. Because lies don't crumble quietly. They collapse with the weight of every truth. They tried to outrun. They didn't give her time to prepare. The Kendricks moved. The way wealthy families do when order has been broken. Quiet, precise, and without warning. Sienna had barely taken off her shoes when Lorraine stepped into the living room, posture straight. Eyes unreadable. Her husband followed behind her, slower, heavier, but just as shaken. And then there was Marcus. Sienna's new husband, standing by the doorway with confusion carved into his face like he was seeing his wife for the first time. Sienna blinked when she walked in, the color draining from her cheeks. Mom. Dad, what's going on? Lorraine didn't answer. She placed her phone on the coffee table as gently as someone setting down a weapon. Who is Felicia Ross? Sienna's lips parted, but no sound came out. Her fingers twitched by her sides, searching for a lie she could hold steady. I don't understand. Stop. One word sharp enough to slice the room in half. Marcus stepped forward. Sienna, who is Felicia? His voice cracked, not with anger yet, but with betrayal he hadn't been expecting to feel on a morning like this. Sienna swallowed hard, eyes darting between the 3 people who now looked like judges. That's just a misunderstanding, she whispered. Just something the vendor got wrong. Lorraine raised an eyebrow. A single devastating gesture. They said she signed every last-minute form. They said she answered the phone this morning. They said she's the mother of the bride. Sienna's breath hitched. Her lie was trying to hold itself up by splinters. Now she opened her mouth. Twice. Once to deny, once to spin, but nothing good came out. You don't understand, she finally breathed. It wasn't like that. Then explain it. Marcus said. His voice wasn't cracking anymore. It was hardening. Sienna tried. She stepped closer to him, reaching for his arm, but he pulled back just an inch, just enough for her to feel it. And that small movement broke something in her. She closed her eyes tightly, tears spilling before she could stop them. I just wanted things to be perfect, she whispered. I didn't want anyone judging me or her. Lorraine folded her arms, chin lifting, judging. Who exactly? My mom, Sienna said, voice collapsing. I didn't want you to meet her. I didn't want you to see where I come from. Marcus blinked. Stunned. Your mother is alive. All this time you said she passed. Sienna nodded once, shame pouring down her face. I was ashamed of our house, of her clothes, her weight, her accent, the way she talks, the way she moves, everything. The confession spilled out in fragments. Pieces of a truth she'd buried so deep she'd started to choke on it. She raised me alone. We didn't have much. We never did. And when I met you, when I saw your family, your home, how polished everything is, I didn't want to ruin that. I didn't want you to see her and think less of me. Marcus looked like someone had punched the breath out of him. You thought I would care about that? She's my mother. Sienna cried. But she embarrasses me. She always has. And I thought if I brought her into this life, you'd think I married up, that I didn't belong. Silence slammed into the room, a deep, painful one. Lorraine took a step forward, her face as still as stone. You built your marriage on a lie, she said. Quietly. A lie about life, a lie about death, and a lie about the woman who gave you hers. Sienna shook her head rapidly, tears falling faster. I didn't mean. Lorraine leaned in slightly, voice dropping to a whisper that felt heavier than a shout. You didn't just deceive Marcus. She paused, letting the moment breathe just enough to sting. You deceived us. You deceived our whole family. The room didn't soften for Sienna. It hardened. Every wall, every shadow, every breath. Her confession didn't bring sympathy the way she must have hoped. It brought calculation. Lorraine's eyes sharpened the way wealthy women do when the world stops lining up the way they planned. Marcus paced once, twice, jaw tightening, hands on his hips as he tried to fit this new truth into the marriage he thought he understood. And then there was the groom's father, Mr. Kendrick, standing near the bookshelf, silent but watching everything. His calm was the most frightening thing in the room. Lorraine finally spoke, folding her arms. You lied to us about your upbringing. You lied about your mother. You lied about her death. That is not insecurity, Sienna. That is calculated manipulation. Sienna shook her head, tears blurring her vision. It wasn't manipulation. Marcus cut her off. His voice wasn't raised, but it was firm in a way she had never heard before. You let my family believe we were supporting a woman who grew up alone. You let us pity you. You let my mother think she was filling a hole in your life. He stepped closer, eyes narrowing. Was that the point? Sienna backed up until she hit the arm of the couch. Her voice came out thin, cracking. No, I just didn't want to lose you or your parents. I didn't want you to look at me differently if you saw where I came from. Lorraine laughed, but there was no humor in it. You mean if we saw your real life, your real mother? The truth you buried because you wanted to fit into this family. Sienna's eyes flicked toward the floor, a gesture that said everything without a word. We trusted you, Marcus said quietly. Every story you told us, every detail. All based on a lie. That feels like fraud, Sienna. Her chest heaved. Please, it wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. Lorraine's voice had the finality of a slammed door. You wore our sympathy like jewelry. You wanted our name, our resources, our comfort, but not our truth, not our expectations. And certainly not your own mother. Sienna pressed her hands to her face, sobbing now. I was scared. I didn't want you thinking I married for money. I Didn't want you thinking I was using you. I didn't want you to judge her. Mr. Kendrick finally spoke, his voice low and steady. Did your mother even know about this wedding? The question sliced through her breakdown like a blade. Sienna lifted her head slowly, eyes red and wide. Her silence answered before her mouth could. Marcus staggered back a step like the truth hit him physically. You didn't invite her. I gave her the wrong address, she whispered. I gave her the wrong address, she whispered. I didn't want her there. I didn't want her seeing everything. I didn't want her talking. I didn't want her judged or me judged. Lorraine's nostrils flared. So instead, you judged her first. The words shook something loose in Sienna. Her knees buckled slightly, but she caught herself on the edge of the couch. She covered her mouth with both hands. The sound of her crying too raw to hide. Marcus stared at her. Hurt, anger, disbelief, all crushed into one expression he couldn't escape. You built this marriage on a lie. Sienna, a big one. Sienna reached for him again, but he stepped out of her reach. I don't even know who you are right now, he said softly. Lorraine exchanged a look with her husband. One of agreement, not debate. A quiet decision formed between them, the way old couples communicate, without words. She turned back to Sienna. Enough crying. Sienna froze. Lorraine picked up her phone, tapping the screen with controlled precision. There is only one way forward from this. Sienna's breath caught. What? What do you mean? Lorraine stared her down with a gaze that didn't blink. We need to speak to your mother. She let the words settle heavy enough to still the air. Then with quiet finality, immediately the first call came just afternoon. My phone lit up where it sat on the table beside the contract papers. Sienna's name glowing bright, cutting through the dim quiet of my apartment. Like a warning flare. I stared at it without moving. The sound vibrated. Through the wood, through my hand, through the bruised place in my chest she left behind the day before. I let it ring. She didn't deserve my voice yet. Not after yesterday. Not after the ballroom. Not after the lie I was still trying to swallow. The ringing stopped. Started again. Stopped. Started again. Finally, she switched to text. Mom. Please pick up. The words sat on my screen, small and trembling, but I didn't open the message. I didn't need to. I could feel the panic under every letter. I could hear the shaky breathing she must have been doing on the other end, trying to control something that had already fallen apart. I turned my phone face down, let her sit in that silence. I'd lived in worse. Across town, the walls of the Kendrick home held a different kind of quiet. Not mine, the kind built from heartbreak. There's the kind built from suspicion. Sienna stood in the center of their living room like a child caught between two storms, eyes swollen, hands trembling against her thighs. Lorraine paced slowly, her disappointment more terrifying than anger. Mr. Kendrick sat stiffly in the armchair, his jaw set tight. And Marcus had his hands folded behind his neck, elbows out, staring at the floor like he was trying to steady the ground beneath him. Have you told us everything? He asked. Finally. Not harsh, not loud, just heavy. Sienna nodded. Too fast, too desperate. Yes, I swear. That's it. Marcus lifted his head. His eyes were red, not from tears. He hadn't cried yet, but from the pressure of everything he just learned. You lied about your mother being dead. You lied about your past. You lied about her involvement in the wedding. But answer this one thing. She froze. His voice dropped. Did you ever plan to introduce me to her? The question hit harder than shouting ever could. Sienna opened her mouth, then closed it. No sound came out. Her silence was the answer. Marcus exhaled. Long and deep. The kind of breath you take when something breaks inside you. And you know it can't be fixed with an apology. He stepped back from her, rubbing his hands over his face like he needed to wipe the entire moment away. Lorraine glanced at her husband, lips pressed tight. She'd stopped pacing. Stopped questioning. She looked like a woman who had already started writing. Sienna out of the version of life she thought her son would have. Sienna felt it. Her shoulders caved. And she reached for her phone again, her voice shaking. I'll call her. I'll fix this. She'll help. Marcus didn't respond. He looked away. Sienna dialed my number again. It barely rang once before going to voicemail. She texted again. Mom, please. I need you. The message stayed unread. My silence was the only boundary I had left. She tried calling again. Then again. The sound echoed through the Kendrick living room, each unanswered. Ring tightening the tension. Lorraine finally snapped. If she won't pick up for you, why would she pick up for us? Sienna wiped her eyes, shaking her head wildly. She will. She has to. She always does. But she didn't know me anymore. Not after what she did. Hours passed. Nerves frayed. Truth rotted the air. Then, as if the universe wanted to push everything further, an email notification chimed on all their phones at once from Blue Ridge Events and Catering. Subject, urgent response required. Marcus clicked at first, his face drained. He read quietly, voice tightening as he reached the last line. Guarantor must respond within 24 hours. He looked up slowly. Everyone felt it. Time had started running out. The knock didn't sound ordinary. It wasn't the soft kind neighbors use or the careless kind delivery drivers give. It was firm. 3-measure taps that carry purpose. The kind of knock that tells you whoever's on the other side isn't here by accident. I stood in my living room. For a second. Inhaling slowly, the sunlight through my curtains felt too bright for the heaviness in my chest. My phone lay silent on the table. Sienna's unanswered messages sitting beneath the contract papers like bruises that hadn't healed. The knock came again, still steady, still waiting. I walked toward the door, each step quiet against the floor. When I opened it, the hallway seemed to shrink. Standing there were all of them. Marcus, his mother. Lorraine, his father, and Sienna wedged behind them like she wanted to disappear into the wall. Marcus's eyes were the first to meet mine. He didn't look angry. He looked shaken, like he'd come face to face with a truth he wasn't prepared to carry. His father stood beside him, posture stiff, hands clasped in front of him, the way men do when they're trying to remain respectful in unfamiliar territory. Lorraine stood in the middle. Her presence took up the entire doorway, and behind her, Sienna hovered with her head lowered, hair frizzy from hours of running her hands through it, mascara smudged at the corners. She looked nothing like a bride. She looked like someone afraid her entire world might fall apart. Before any of them could speak, Miss Janice's door across the hall cracked open. She peeked out, eyes widening as she took in the scene. Mom, she Murmured under her breath, lips curling with the kind of knowing only older women carry. Tables turning already. I kept my expression still, dignified, controlled. Come in. Marcus nodded once. Grateful, but nervous. They stepped past me one by one, the air shifting with their presence. Sienna hesitated the longest, her body trembling as she crossed the threshold like she wasn't sure she deserved to step inside my life. Because after what she did, she didn't. I closed the door gently behind them. The soft click echoed. My apartment was small, but in moments like this, small spaces feel powerful. Intimate, honest. No room for lies to hide. They stood near my couch, unsure whether to sit. I wasn't expecting visitors, I said quietly. But you're welcome. Lorraine looked around the apartment, not judging, studying the framed photos on the shelves, the neatly folded throw blanket, the plant by the window, the life her daughter had erased with one lie. Marcus cleared his throat. Mrs. Ross, thank you for letting us in. We know this isn't easy. I tilted my head slightly. It hasn't been an easy weekend. Sienna flinched at that. Her hands gripped each other so tightly I could see the whiteness in her knuckles. She tried to step forward, but Marcus lifted a hand gently, stopping her. This conversation wasn't hers to lead anymore. Lorraine inhaled slowly. The weight of her disbelief filling the room. She looked at me. The way someone looks at a ghost they've been told isn't real. We're here because the vendor contacted us. They said you signed the paperwork. They said you answered the call. I did. I replied. Calmly. I signed what Sienna asked me to sign. I answered because my name was attached to something I didn't understand. Lorraine's eyes flickered. Hurt, confusion, anger, then settled back into disbelief. Sienna told us her mother died years ago. My breath stayed steady. I'm very much alive. It wasn't until she truly looked at me. Really looked that her face changed. Her lips parted, her eyes widened just a fraction, and all the color drained from her cheeks. The truth hit her like cold water. Her voice trailed off, trembling between shock and realization. Then she said it soft, stunned, and heavy as stone. You're alive. For a moment, no one breathed. Lorraine's words, you're alive, still floated in the room like dust that refused to settle. Sienna's quiet sobs were the only sound muffled behind her trembling hands. Marcus stood frozen, the weight of betrayal settling across his shoulders. And Mr. Kendrick, he watched me with an expression that wasn't unkind, just stunned, like he'd suddenly realized there were whole parts of his daughter-in-law's life he'd never been allowed to see. I walked toward the small dining table, pulled out a chair, and sat down. Calm, steady. Not because the moment deserved calm, but because I'd learned a long time ago that anger never protects a mother. It only exposes her wounds. If you're here, I began softly. You deserve the truth. All of it. Sienna's breath hitched, but I didn't look at her. Not yet. We didn't have much when she was growing up. I said some months, not even enough for groceries after the bills were paid. I worked the early shift at the diner, the late shift at the department store, and cleaned apartments in between. Lorraine's eyes lowered slightly. The first crack in her judgment. I raised her alone. No help, no child support, no partner. Just me trying to keep my baby fed, warm, and safe. My voice didn't tremble, but my hands tightened around Each other under the table. There were things she wanted that I couldn't give her. Dance classes, name brand clothes, trips other kids took. I tried. Lord knows I tried, but I couldn't keep up. Marcus's father, who'd been silent until now, shifted in his seat. His eyes softened in a way that surprised even him. She never told us any of that. He murmured, not a word. I nodded. She stopped talking about home around the time she went to college. That's when the distance really started. She didn't bring friends around. She didn't invite me to events. I could feel her pulling away, but I didn't know why. My chest tightened, remembering the years of unanswered texts, canceled visits, and birthday calls that ended quicker each year. I thought she was busy. I thought maybe I'd done something wrong. But I see now. I looked directly at Sienna, then slow, intentional. She was embarrassed of me. Sienna broke. Then she sank to the floor, her hands covering her face as tears streamed down her cheeks. The sound tore through the room, raw and unfiltered. But I didn't reach for her. Not this time. Marcus's face twisted. Pain, anger, confusion blending into something he didn't yet have words for. He turned to his father, voice tight. She told us her mother died, that she grew up alone, that she never had anyone. Mr. Kendrick closed his eyes briefly. She didn't grow up alone. She grew up ashamed of where she came from. The truth of it settled like dust on a polished surface, undeniable. Unavoidable. I folded my hands on the table, keeping my voice gentle. I never asked her to hide me. I never asked her to pretend we were something we weren't. I just wanted her to be proud of where she came from, even if it wasn't perfect. Silence thickened again, but it wasn't empty this time. It was full of truth, of regret, of the echoes of all the years we'd lost. Lorraine finally spoke, pulling her jacket tighter around her shoulders. Her voice was steady, but her eyes carried the weight of a decision she didn't want to make. Mrs. Ross, she said, her tone shifting from shock to serious. We appreciate your honesty. She clasped her hands together. Inhale sharp. But with the vendor involved, the unresolved balance and your name on the paperwork. We need you to understand something. The room grew colder. Sienna froze mid-sob. Marcus stepped back instinctively. Lorraine leaned forward, voice cold as marble. We need your help, Mrs. Ross, or legal action may be taken. The moment they left my apartment, the quiet returned. But it wasn't the same quiet from before. This one carried weight. Truth. Consequence. I closed the door gently behind them and walked straight to my bedroom. The air feeling heavier with every step. My body moved slowly, not from age, from exhaustion. The kind that settles into the bones when your heart has been stepped on twice in the same week. I sat on the edge of my bed and exhaled deeply. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I didn't replay the humiliation. I just stared at the wall, letting the silence sit with me like an old friend who didn't ask questions. Then my phone buzzed once, twice, 3 times. I didn't touch it. I lay back on the pillows, staring at the ceiling as the buzzing grew more frantic, more insistent. My phone rattled against the nightstand, vibrating across the wood like it was trying to escape its own desperation. By late morning, the missed calls were at 13. By noon, 21. By early afternoon, 32. But it was the sound buried between the calls, the short shaky voice notes that cut deeper. Mom, please. Mom, I messed up. They think I'm married for money. They think I used them. Mom, please answer. Her voice cracked. Again, then dissolved into full sobs. Not controlled tears, the messy kind. That come from fear and exposure. Still, I didn't pick up. Pain demands boundaries. And this was mine. By 4 o'clock, the phone buzzed so violently it nearly fell to the floor. I finally turned it over. 54 missed calls, messages stacked on top of each other, voice notes, texts. Even Marcus had reached out. Brief, respectful, confused. But I wasn't ready to speak. Not when my daughter only remembered I existed because the truth had come knocking. My chest felt tight. So I forced myself to stand. Air. I needed air. I slipped on my shoes and stepped outside into the mild afternoon light. My breathing steadied as I walked toward the small courtyard near my building. The smell of fresh cut grass calming the heat rising in my chest. A little girl from the second floor. Ava with the big puff ponytails was sitting on the steps with a coloring book. She looked up the moment she saw me. "Hi, Miss Felicia," she chirped, swinging her legs. Then her smile widened into something soft. Almost shy. "Your dress yesterday was so pretty." The words hit me like a warm hand pressed gently against a bruise. I froze. That dress, the royal blue one, was meant for a celebration, not a humiliation. Yet here was this tiny child remembering the beauty in it instead of the pain. My throat tightened. I knelt slowly beside her. "Thank you, baby," I whispered. "That means more to me than you know." She nodded proudly before returning to her crayons, humming to herself. I walked away before the tears slipped out, but they came anyway, quiet, warm, the kind that didn't ask permission. They weren't for Sienna. Not this time. They were for me. For every moment I tried to be a good mother. For every moment I'd swallowed her to keep the peace. For every time I'd hoped my daughter would see me, not as an embarrassment, but as the woman who kept her alive. I wiped my face before re-entering my apartment. The phone still buzzed occasionally, but the urgency had faded. Panic eventually gives way to exhaustion. I sat back on the bed, picked up the phone for the first time in hours, and finally opened our text thread. My fingers hovered over the screen. "Steady now," I typed slowly, deliberately, "come tomorrow morning." Then I put the phone down, not to wait on her response, but to reclaim my breath. Sienna arrived before the sun even finished rising. I saw her silhouette through the peephole, shoulders slumped, arms wrapped around herself, hair tied in a loose, frantic bun like she'd been pacing all night. When I opened the door, her eyes were already redimmed and swollen, her breath trembling in short, uneven bursts. "Mom," she whispered. I stepped aside without touching her. "Come in." She crossed the threshold the way a person enters a hospital room. Slowly. Uncertainly, carrying the weight of consequences she wasn't strong enough to hold. She stood near the couch, hands clasped in front of her chest like a child about to confess a broken vase. I'm so sorry," she stammered. "I didn't. I never meant for things to get like this. I messed everything up. And now they're looking at me like I'm some kind of." I lifted a hand gently. "No excuses today." She swallowed hard, tears falling again. I know. I didn't want you to hate me. I sat down in my armchair and looked at her calmly. Not coldly, just with the quiet strength you learn from surviving too many storms. I don't hate you, I said. But I am hurt deeply. And what you did, it has consequences for you, for them, for me. She lowered her head, shoulders shaking. I continued, voice low but steady. You came here because your in-laws gave you an ultimatum, not because you suddenly remembered you love your mother. Her hands flew to her face as she sobbed. I let her cry. Let her feel every ounce of the mess she'd buried me under. After a long minute, she wiped her cheeks with shaky fingers. Mom, will you help me? I leaned forward slightly, clasping my hands together. I'll help, but only on my terms. Sienna nodded desperately, relief rushing across her face, even though she didn't yet know what those terms were. Just then, a soft knock sounded at the door. I opened it to find Marcus's father, Mr. Kendrick, standing there with a respectful nod. I hope I'm not intruding, he said quietly. Not at all. Come in, he stepped inside, offering a tentative smile. His eyes, unlike his wife's sharp ones, held apology, humanity, humility. I wanted to speak with you privately, Mrs. Ross, he said. Before we move forward with anything. I nodded for him to continue. He cleared his throat. Yesterday, when we learned the truth, I made assumptions, unfair ones, about you. About your life, about the kind of woman you were. Sienna looked up sharply, guilt flashing across her face. Mr. Kendrick went on, but after hearing you speak and after seeing how you carried yourself, I want you to know this. I'm sorry for judging you without knowing you and for not questioning the story we were given. His voice was sincere. No arrogance, no formality, just a man admitting he'd been wrong. I gave a small nod. Thank you. That means something. He walked back toward the door, paused, then looked at Sienna. I hope you understand the depth of the pain you caused. Not just for your family, but for yourself. Sienna's eyes filled again, but she didn't speak. He left quietly, the door clicking behind him. The room fell still. Then I turned to my daughter. Sit down. She obeyed instantly. I spoke slowly, deliberately. If I step into this, I do it with clarity, with boundaries, and with full understanding of what I'm signing up for. No more hiding. No more pretending I'm dead. No more shame. Sienna nodded quickly. Yes, I understand. Anything you need, Mom. I held her gaze, making sure she felt the weight of my next words. First things first, I said, bring the contract. She blinked. The wedding contract, yes, all of it. Every page. I leaned back, voice calm, but firm, power settling into its rightful place. I want to read every word. The contract sat open on my table. Like a wound, page after page of fine print, signatures, initials, clauses, and penalties. Sienna sat beside me, breathing shallowly, twisting her fingers until her knuckles ached. Across from us, Marcus sat upright in the dining chair, his elbows on, his knees watching me with a quiet concentration I wasn't used to receiving from anyone outside my own blood. I read each line. Slowly, not rushing, not trembling, not intimidated. Every mother who's raised a child alone knows how to read danger when she sees it. Be it in a bill, a landlord's note, or in this case, an overpriced wedding contract her daughter weaponized to hide her shame. When I finished, I closed the folder carefully and picked up my phone. "Who are you calling?" Sienna whispered. Her voice was raw, almost. "The vendor," I said, standing. "The person who should have called you instead of me." Her face palled. "Mom, wait." But I was already dialing. Professional tone, head high, calm breath. "Good afternoon. This is Mrs. Ross. We spoke earlier about the wedding authorization." The woman, Carrera, answered immediately, relief in her voice. "Oh, Mrs. Ross. Yes. Thank you for calling back. We're still needing clarity about the balance and the guarantor." "Yes," I said evenly, "and I'd like to resolve that issue right now." Marcus sat up straighter. Sienna squeezed her eyes shut. I continued, "First, remove my name from your system completely." I did not hire your company, contract your services, or authorize any debt. My signature was obtained under false pretenses and will not be tied to this balance. Kara cleared her throat. "Understood. We can update that. We'll just need confirmation of the rightful responsible party. That would be Sienna Ross Kendrick and her husband Marcus Kendrick," I said clearly without looking at my daughter. "They signed the primary contract. They hosted the event. They bear the cost." Marcus didn't flinch. He watched me with something close to respect. Something Sienna had never told him I deserved. Sienna let out a choked sound. Not an objection, a realization. Her mother wasn't weak. Her mother wasn't small. Her mother wasn't the embarrassment she'd painted me as. Kara typed quickly. "All right, I'll change the guarantor to the primary contracting parties. The balance will be redirected to them." "Good," I replied. "And kindly send me written confirmation of those changes for my records." "Yes, ma'am. I'll email it within the hour." When I ended the call, the room felt different. Lighter, clearer, settled. Marcus exhaled slowly, rubbing the back of his neck. "Mrs. Ross, I don't know how to thank you. You handled that better than any of us could have." I gave him a small nod. Responsibility belongs to those who created the problem, not the ones cleaning up after it. He absorbed my words like they were more revelation than reprimand. Meanwhile, Sienna sat motionless, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. Not hysterical this time. Just stunned. She'd spent years building a new version of herself, sculpting away every trace of the life she'd come from. A life that included me. But now she was staring at the woman she'd buried. And realizing I was stronger above ground than she ever expected. Carrara's email came in loud. Verified every detail, read every correction twice, then slid the papers toward Marcus. "You two will need to sign this," I said. "Together." Marcus nodded without hesitation. Sienna reached for the pen with trembling fingers. When all signatures were in place, I gathered the documents, straightened them with one firm tap on the table, and stood up. The movement was deliberate, final. A closing of one chapter and the preparation for another. I looked at them both. My daughter with shame on her cheeks and her husband with dawning clarity in his eyes. Without raising my voice, without trembling, without apology, I said nothing else. I simply stood. The moment I stepped outside, the air felt different. Cooler, softer, as if God himself had cracked a window open for me to breathe again. I didn't walk fast. I didn't storm out. I stepped into the Hallway with the same dignity I'd carried my whole life. The same dignity my daughter had spent years trying to hide. Behind me, the apartment door opened. Then hurried footsteps. "Mom, wait." Sienna's voice wasn't sharp or defensive this time. It was small, broken, human. I stopped at the stairwell. One hand on the railing. Sunlight from the landing window poured over me, warming my back. She came down the hall slowly, wiping her face with the sleeve of her cardigan, her whole body trembling like a child who'd finally run out of excuses. "Mom," she whispered again, breath catching. "Mom, I'm so sorry." I didn't turn fully, just angled my head enough to let her see my face. Calm, steady, unshaken. Her voice cracked open. I didn't want them to think I came from nothing. I inhaled once deeply. Those words, they weren't new. I felt them for years. Heard them without her saying them. But hearing them out loud, it cut deeper than any wrong address ever could. I turned and looked at her fully now. Her eyes dropped to the floor. "You didn't come from nothing," I said softly, but with a firmness that could steady a shaking house. Her chin lifted an inch. Tears pulled again. I stepped closer, not to comfort, but to tell the truth in a way that couldn't be misunderstood or softened. "You came for me." The words hung in the hallway like gospel. Not shouted, not angry, just true. Undeniably true. She pressed her hands to her mouth as another wave of tears broke free. She wasn't crying from embarrassment. Now she was crying from truth finally catching up to her. Years of running, years of pretending, years of trying to be who she thought the world wanted, collapsing right at my feet. "I know I hurt you," she sobbed. "I know I did, and I can't take any of it back. But I didn't hate you, Mom. She swallowed hard. "I hated the way people looked at us. I hated feeling small. I hated feeling like I didn't fit anywhere." I let her speak. Let her stand in the truth. She'd avoided her entire adult life. "I never wanted to erase you," she whispered. "I was just ashamed of everything I came from, everything you had to struggle through. I didn't want that to be part of my story anymore." For a moment, I almost spoke, but fate beat me to it. A woman walking by on the sidewalk, middle-aged, hair wrapped in a bright scarf, carrying grocery bags, paused when she saw me standing there. "Ma'am," she said with a warm smile, "that color looks beautiful on you." I blinked, taken off guard. The compliment was simple, almost ordinary, but sometimes healing doesn't show up with trumpets. Sometimes it whispers through strangers. "Thank you," I said softly. She smiled again and walked on. When she disappeared around the corner, I exhaled. Something inside me loosened. Just a little, but enough. Sienna wiped her cheeks again, watching the whole moment unfold like she was seeing her mother through new eyes. Not the smallness she feared, not the shame she projected, a woman worth noticing, worth respecting, worth honoring. She took a shaky step closer. "Mom." Her voice cracked into a whisper so fragile I could barely hear it. "Can we start over?" The question didn't resolve anything, but it shifted something. Slowly. Cautiously, possibly. Morning sunlight washed softly through my living room windows, warm and steady, the kind of light that doesn't ask you to hurry. It was the first quiet day I'd had in a long time. Not the heavy quiet that sits on your shoulders, but the gentle kind that wraps itself around your ribs and lets you breathe. Again. Sienna's apology still hovered in my mind, raw and trembling. I had heard her. I had believed parts of her. I had forgiven what forgiveness could reach. But forgiveness is not a key. And it is not an invitation back into the same room you destroyed. That morning, I sat with my tea and finally let myself exhale. Not for her, for me. Around 10 o'clock, I slipped on my cardigan and walked to the corner plant shop. It was the same shop I'd passed by for years. Always telling myself, next time. Today, I stepped inside. The air smelled like soil and new beginnings. A young clerk smiled at me. "Morning, ma'am. Looking for anything in particular?" "Something that grows slow," I said. "Something that takes its time." He guided me to a shelf lined with small potted plants. Green, patient, alive. One caught my eye. A soft leaf plant. With roots that looked sturdy even in its tiny pot. It felt right. "I'll take this one." When I returned home, I set the plant gently on the windowsill. A new piece of life in my space. A small, quiet promise. That was enough. That was all I wanted. Not a repaired daughter. Not an instant family. Just one thing in my house growing the right way. Later that afternoon, there was a knock at my door, soft, hesitant. I opened it to find Marcus standing there, hands in his pockets, head slightly bowed. "Mrs. Ross," he said quietly, "I just wanted to say thank you for everything you did and for handling this with more grace than any of us deserved." His sincerity felt like a balm. "You're welcome," I replied. He hesitated. "If you ever want to talk or need anything, you can reach out. I don't know what happens next between you and Sienna, but I see you differently now." I smiled. A small grateful one. "I appreciate that, son." He nodded and left, closing the door softly behind him. The peace that followed wasn't loud. It wasn't triumphant. It wasn't the kind of victory you post online or brag about. It was quiet, like choosing your own breath, like walking away from noise, like understanding that love doesn't always return home in the shape you gave it. That evening, I sat near my window, the plant beside me, its leaves catching the last gold of the sunset. I touched the rim of the pot lightly, feeling the cool ceramic beneath my fingers. This right here was all I needed. Not proximity, not forced closeness, not the illusion of a healed story, just peace. My peace. Then my phone rang again and again. Sienna's name flashed on the screen, bright and insistent. I didn't rush, didn't flinch. Didn't feel guilt or anger or obligation. I picked up my little watering can and began to dampen the soil around the plant, letting the water soak in, slowly letting the phone ring. Behind me like a radio station I wasn't tuned to anymore. When the ringing finally stopped, the silence that replaced it felt like a doorway I had walked through and locked behind me. I wasn't being cruel. I wasn't being petty. I wasn't being cold. I was choosing myself. Finally, fully as I set the watering can down, the last line rose in me. Not bitter, not broken, just true. I lost the daughter I imagined.